is Jody Newell. I am going to be interviewing Kimberly Graham today for, she is a candidate for U.S. Senate to represent the state of Iowa. She's running against Joni Ernst. This is a very important election, as are many. And I just wanted to say, I think so many of us are distracted and rightfully distracted and very hyper-focused on what's happening with this pandemic. And we should be, right? But at the same time, we have elections going on. We have primaries going on that are happening right now. And I think we really need to remember that these are the people who are going to be making decisions, especially that are especially important in times like this. We just saw the stimulus package passed, very lopsided, right? There's so much going to corporations and just crumbs going to the American people, and so many people were left out. These are the people who vote on things like this. These are the people who contribute to that legislation. These are the people who are our voice in making those decisions. So I hope you enjoy the interview, and I hope that you can maintain focus on the elections, because they have such an impact on what we do, not only in everyday life, but especially in situations like this. Okay. Hi, this is Jody with Real Progress in Action. I'm going to be interviewing Kimberly Graham today. She is running for United States Senate in the great state of Iowa. Kimberly, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to talk to you. I've read a lot about the issues that you stand for. You sound like a very strong progressive candidate, and I'm really excited to get into the issues with you today. So I think there are a lot of things that are major progressive issues that we talk about, and then there are some that are definitely specific to Iowa. So I kind of want to start with the macro and get into the micro, right? So broad overbrush, I know that you are enthusiastic about a single-payer healthcare system, about the Green New Deal, definitely criminal justice reform, so what I was wondering is if you could kind of give me the broad pitch of the major issues, major progressive issues that you are advocating for in this campaign.
Well, the three things that I talk about the most with voters are healthcare, namely a Medicare for all or universal single-payer healthcare system. The second thing is the climate crisis and all of the different issues that fall from that. So that's, the overarching issue, but there's a lot that comes from that. And the last thing are investments in families and children. And by that, I mean, for instance, the rest of the developed world spends somewhere between 2 and 4% of its GDP on programs for families and children. And the United States spends 0.6% of our GDP on programs for families and children. So we have a really long way to go. I've been an attorney for abused kids and for parents in the juvenile courts for the last 20 years. So I'm very, very familiar in my day-to-day life with how we fail to invest, especially in children in this country. We talk a good game about how important children are, how important elders are, how important veterans are. But there's that old saying, if you want to know someone's values, look at their checkbook, and you will know their values. And we don't spend money on children, and we don't spend money on elders, on to the extent that I believe that we should. So that's kind of the third pillar, the healthcare, climate, and just investments in people. And there's a lot, of course, nuance and detail to that, but those are the three main issues.
Great. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background with working with children. I understand you were an attorney and you worked on behalf of children who were possibly abused. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, no, I didn't work in the past. I still work today. I'm the only candidate of the 5 on the Democratic side running for this seat who's still working. I've cut back my schedule as much as I can, but I still have to work. It's great for the other candidates that they have the financial resources, that they don't have to work and they're able to take the time off to just campaign full time. I don't have that ability to do that. So And I love what I do anyway, so I don't know that I'd want to stop doing it until I had some other job already, that I was going to. So for the last couple of years, particularly, I've been the attorney and guardian ad litem for all of the children in the Polk County, which is Des Moines. Des Moines is in Polk County, Iowa, for the Des Moines, the Polk County Recovery Court Program. So what that is a specialty court program. So typically if there's an issue where there's abuse or neglect alleged of children, typically that if that's found to be accurate, it's almost always because of either drug or alcohol addiction, mental health issues. A lot of it comes from poverty. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons and how that we end up arriving at that conclusion that a child has been abused or neglected, and that the parent is unable to safely care for that child. And so in some cases, the child is removed from the parent. The court always looks to place that child with a family member if there's a suitable family member available. If there's not, then that child could be placed in foster care. And then everybody starts working to get that child placed back with that parent as soon as possible. That is the goal. And so as the attorney and the representative of the children in those cases, my goal is to know what's happening with the children. I will speak to whoever they're placed with, if that's a family member, if that's a foster parent, whatever. If that child's old enough to be in some kind of therapy, I will sometimes be speaking with the child's therapist. I might be speaking with the child's teacher if the child's old enough to be in school. And so I work in a recovery court program, and the recovery court program is different than regular juvenile court because we have a lot of stepped up services and stepped up accountability. So the parents actually come to court physically. Well, they used to. Now we do it by GoToMeeting, but we meet once a week now on GoToMeeting, but it was physically that the parents would come to the courtroom and actually sit and check in with the judge. There's one judge who administers that recovery court program. So the participants get to actually see that judge and talk with that judge every single week. And there's just a lot higher level of accountability and services. So that program has a pretty good success rate in helping these families get back on track and stay on track longer term, because there's just a lot more checking in with the court and a lot more services available, and it's easier to access them. Whereas in a regular juvenile court setting, we're still trying to do all of that, but those check-ins with the judge may literally only be every 6 months. And so in between, we still have other services, and the Department of Human Services social worker and FSRP, which is a family preservation service, comes into the home weekly and all of that. But we don't have that piece of the judge, him or herself, actually checking in with those parents on a weekly basis, which I think makes a really big positive difference for the families. So.
Absolutely. I think kind of stemming from that as well, I think that kind of seems, it will give you an interesting view, an interesting perspective, and kind of knowledge of what's going on with families, with children, with families and things like that. And so, like you were talking about, a lot of times it does involve drug abuse or poverty, things like that. So I know that some of your policies, I would think, would be informed by that, talking about dealing with substance use and things like that. And so can you kind of talk a little bit about which policies you feel are informed by your experience with that and your kind of intimate knowledge of what's going on with people who are struggling?
Yeah, well, one that comes to mind that relates back to the kind of three overarching, things that I talk about most with voters in our campaign is investing in families and children. And what that can look like is, for example, we are the only developed nation that doesn't have a universal child care program, a universal child care system. We're the only developed nation that doesn't have universal paid parental leave. And those are things that drastically affect children, especially age children 0 to 3. One thing I've learned from what I've done from the last 20 years and studying child development and so forth is that if you mess up 0 to 3, you've really messed up. It is very difficult to undo significant trauma to a child, and if that child has failed to bond properly and failed to have the appropriate neurological connections made and it's, we could digress for hours on that, but it's just really difficult. There's a lot of mental health issues, physical health issues, potential substance abuse issues that have, depending on what study you're talking about, have been correlated or connected with trauma to a child from age 0 to 3. And straight up having children. So a $15 an hour minimum wage is a huge issue when we say we need to invest in children, because one of the biggest predictors of academic success for children is the household income of their parents. That is the largest predictor of academic success, is the household income of their parents. So when we have families living in poverty, we are handicapping that child who's growing up in that family that's living in poverty. So, a lot of people, we'll talk about sex, we'll talk about politics, we'll talk about religion. A lot of people, my cat is over here, that's why I'm looking down here. But we won't talk about dollars and cents. We won't talk about money. Oh, we don't want to talk about that. Well, we need to talk about that, because money is choices. Money is power. When you have less money, you have fewer choices. So that's why it's so important that we don't lose sight of the fact that at the beginning and end of all of this, we are a tradition where people who work are paid for their work in an appropriate way. And, that's something that certainly a $15 an hour minimum wage is a bare bones floor for that. I mean, it should really be about $20, $21 an hour. And I know that just makes some people's jaws drop. But if we really wanted to say that if you're working full time, you should be able to live a basic life of health and dignity, not a luxurious life of health and dignity, the minimum wage should be about $20 an hour in this country. And it's not even half that.
Hear, hear.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess while we're on the topic of money, one of my favorite things about you as a candidate, in addition to the progressive policies that I agree with, is that you are not accepting any PAC money, that you have taken a strong stance about money in politics. So could you talk a little bit about that, kind of how you feel about money in politics and how it affects our campaign finance?
Yeah. So our overarching campaign slogan for our campaign is "Best Senator Money Can't Buy." Best Senator Money Can't Buy. I borrowed that slogan from Senator Elizabeth Warren, who used that slogan for her 2012 Senate run. And I met her last March, not this month, but a year ago, at an event here in Des Moines, and got to talk to her for a couple minutes. And I had not announced yet, but I, at that point, knew I was going to be announcing my run in a couple of months. And I asked if I could use that slogan. And she said, "Oh, sure, great." So, and the reason that I wanted to use that slogan was because the reason we don't have universal single-payer health care, the reason that people are dying from rationing insulin, the reason we don't have a higher minimum wage, the reason that on and on, name a problem in this country, and most of the time, the reason we don't have that thing that we should have is because of the oversized influence of corporate money in politics. It all comes back to that. And so until we have major, true campaign finance reform, until we hopefully someday ultimately get to publicly funded elections so that we fund the campaigns, we, the people, fund the campaigns, so that there's no corporate money coming in from mega corporations who can, shovel in tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and definitely buy an outsized influence that way. Until we get there, and until we get more what I call regular people in positions of power in the United States, this is not going to change. 40 years ago or so, the top 10% of people in this country controlled about 1/3 of the wealth in this country. Top 10% used to control about 1/3 of the wealth some 40 years ago or so. Today, the top 10% of people control about 75% of the wealth in the United States of America. And actually, I think I might have a slightly outdated number. It might be worse than that now. So And that trajectory of the have-nots still having not, and the haves being fewer of them and having more and more is not slowing down. It is not slowing down. We just saw that in the stimulus package that was passed 2 days ago, right? That stimulus package, yes, it threw crumbs at some of us, not even all of us, by the way. College students who were claimed as a dependent on their parents' tax returns, but who are living on their own right now, don't get any of that money, and they need it. So it didn't even cover everybody who needs it, first of all. And the little $1,200 crumbs that won't even last a few weeks in a lot of places in this country, depending on how much your rent is and so on, was in no way balanced by the money that was given away to multinational corporations that absolutely don't need it at this point. Could there ever be a day, if this pandemic goes on long enough, when some corporations may need bailout money? Maybe. I don't know. I don't have their books in front of me. But that day is certainly not today. I mean, we're not, it's certainly not today. But the people that are barely hanging on by their fingernails, they need that money today, and they need a lot more than $1,200. So, and that's a good example of right now of how there's not a critical mass of regular people who are not beholden to corporations sitting in Congress today. If there were, that bill would have looked substantially different, but it didn't. In order to get the crumbs, which they still need, thrown to some people, a lot of Democrats, including progressive Democrats like Senator Sanders and Senator Warren, had to vote for, actually was Senator Warren there? Anyway, it doesn't matter, whatever. We had a number of well-known progressive senators who voted for this and who also said they weren't happy about it. They did because they didn't want to hold up $1,200 from getting to people who desperately need it, but they were not happy about the rest of the content of that bill. So yeah, so we're not taking corporate PAC money. I do like to be very, very clear. Maybe it's a hazard of being a lawyer. I don't know. I'd be happy to take PAC money from, say, my flight attendant union, because there are like unions that have PACs. There are progressive organizations that have PACs. I'm not taking corporate PAC money. I was joking that, Ben and Jerry, I might make an exception for Ben and Jerry. No, I'm joking. Anyway, but no, I'm not taking any corporate PAC money, but there's something even more important than that, in my opinion, or just as important as that. All 5 of us who are running for this U.S. Senate seat in Iowa are saying we're not taking corporate PAC money. And as far as we know, that's accurate. I have Tim, who's our senior strategist, research everybody else's FEC reports every quarter to see where their money's coming from. And anybody can do that. That's public record. And no, none of us are taking corporate PAC money. But unfortunately, Teresa Greenfield, who's the DSCC-backed candidate and endorsed candidate, has taken tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars. It might have hit over 100 at this point. I haven't checked recently, in corporate lobbyist money. So what a lot of candidates are doing, especially more centrist, for lack of a better word, or moderate Dems, they're saying, I'm not taking corporate PAC money, and they're not. But what they do instead is individuals who work for corporate lobby firms will give their campaign $1,000, $2,000, $2,800 max out, contributions. And so when you give a lot of money to a campaign, you have to say, of course, your name, your occupation, and who you work for. And so it's very easy, and again, this is all public record, to see lobbyist and the name of the lobby firm. Then it's also public record what lobby firms are registered to lobby for what corporations. So we've done that research, and we've seen that candidate Greenfield has taken money from healthcare industry lobbyists, from pharmaceutical industry lobbyists, from fossil fuel industry lobbyists, from big tobacco lobbyists, including those that are responsible for vaping that's, the vaping craze. So yeah, so that's, and I've actually had people say to me, and I understand, like, I think human nature is we want to think the best of people. And I've had potential voters say to me when I've brought this up, oh, that doesn't mean she's gonna vote for their interest, when she gets there, just because hey, campaigns are expensive. You should take corporate lobby money too. Just don't vote for what they tell you to vote for, though, when you get there. To that I reply, I don't think that's the way that works. So, everyone who's seeing this probably knows, but a lot of regular voters who maybe don't delve into the nuances and the details of politics may not know that most of our laws for many years now are not written by legislators. That senator you elected, that congressperson you elected, they're not writing laws. Corporate attorneys are writing laws. And the corporate attorneys are knocking on the door of that person that they gave $2,800 to, and that their other lobbyists at that firm each gave $2,800 to, and saying, hey, we'd like you to pass this, please. Or, hey, that legislation you're going to vote on tomorrow? We don't like 3B because that's really bad for our body and not had in that bill. And so that's what's going on. And, how I put it to people is like this. I say, look, when you give your $25 to a candidate, right? Like most people, yeah, I like that candidate. I think that candidate stands for things that are going to help me or my children or my grandchildren or the planet or some cause I believe in. So I donate my $25. I don't donate that $25 because I donate it because I believe that candidate's going to vote for things and put forward bills that are going to benefit me or my children or my grandchildren or people I love or the planet or something. Why is a corporate lobbyist any different? They're going to be donating that money if we think they're not going to want something, or we think that they don't think that that candidate's going to vote in a way down the road that is going to benefit them or the people they're lobbying for. I think we're kidding ourselves. So it would just all be better if we all had a vote. Everyone had one vote, and we basically all had the equivalent of $1 of influence. You know what I mean? Like we all had equality of influence among politicians, and trying to influence the way our legislators vote or see things. And we're really, really far from that right now.
Agreed. Unfortunately, agreed. Yeah, and definitely, you talk about the last 4 decades and how this has kind of changed, and the influence has gone to, and the control of the, wealth of our nation has gone to the top 10%. So, and of course that coincides with rulings that have shaped our campaign finance reform. So we have Buckley v. Vallejo back in '78. How long ago is that? That's 4 decades ago. That's 40 years, just like you were talking about, right up to the Citizens United decision that was made in, 2009, I believe.
I don't remember the year, but yeah, I always think it's a little bit funny when people think Citizens United was like what really broke the, no doubt it was horrible and it needs to be overturned, but that was not like when things went to hell in a handbasket. It was way before that. It was way before that.
Absolutely. So can we back up just a minute? Actually, you were talking about lobbying. I noticed that another thing that is on your website with your issues is talking about a ban on legislators becoming lobbyists. And of course, this is kind of a revolving door situation. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I just don't think you should be able to do that because it seems like an enormous conflict of interest. I believe Senator Sanders probably proposes the same thing, but I distinctly remember hearing Senator Warren talk about it at a particular event that I was at as well. And I liked her proposal on it, that basically you're frankly not allowed to do that. I'm sure there's a lot of other things that if you leave Congress, there's a lot of other things that you could do to make decent money.
Well, it also, kind of defines or exemplifies the way that everybody is in cahoots. You know what I mean? How these things are going on together, the lobbyists and the legislators, and it's very easy to go back and forth from those things because they are all very familiar with each other because they do those things.
Yeah, it just becomes far too insular. It's all too insular, and then regular people, regular individuals just don't, because of that insularity, then there's not enough influence or discussion, I guess, meaningful discussion even happening, between the people that a legislator is supposed to be representing. There's just not enough substantive discussion happening, I don't think. And we certainly see that here in Iowa, and I'm sure that's the same everywhere. But I've routinely had people send me copies of letters that they get back from Senator Joni Ernst, who I'm running against, for people that don't know, in November, if I make it past the primary. And these letters are, they barely nominally address the issue, but it's clear that from what the constituent wrote and was requesting to the letter that they get back, it's like it doesn't even address the issue. It's basically, most of these letters that I've been sent are, people patting people on the head and just saying, well, yeah, I responded. I guess they're trying to say they responded, but it's not really responsive. We had one person here recently that we were in communication with, that our campaign was in communication with, whose sister had been killed by a former a boyfriend. I don't know all the nitty gritty details, but and we that was around the time that the Violence Against Women Act was coming up for reauthorization, and ultimately Senator Ernst didn't want to reauthorize that because the NRA doesn't want her doing anything that would prevent mere boyfriends or girlfriends who have a history of domestic abuse from having firearms. And this Iowan, I believe it was an Iowan, Tim will type at me if I'm saying this wrong. Her sister was killed by a boyfriend, and so this constituent went to Joni Ernst's office here in Des Moines, I believe, to express, that she was upset about this and upset about the failure to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. And I think it was she that sent us a copy of the letter that she got, and this is what really got me, the whole thing is upsetting to me, but the letter from Senator Ernst, if I recall correctly, didn't even acknowledge that this person's sister had been killed. It didn't even say, I'm so sorry for your loss. I can imagine how devastating that was for you, or anything like that. It just launched into, well, here's why we don't want to restrict our Second Amendment rights, and I was just like, are you kidding me? Tim's saying, yeah, the woman we're talking about brought to like 10,000 signatures with her to give to Senator Ernst's office about the Violence Against Women Act.
Well, I guess, let's just dig on into it, because Joni Ernst is an interesting character. So let's talk about Joni and kind of how you, or I guess I should say Senator Ernst, and what differentiates you. I think that's obviously one very defining thing that you just mentioned, but let's talk about what are the let's talk about her and what are the differences between the two of you.
Yeah, there's a couple that come to mind right off the top of my head. One actually, one came to me, I'm just making a note here so I don't forget. One came to me when I was driving someplace last, like late summer, early fall. I happened to be driving someplace by myself to speak at an event or something, and I was thinking about that very question. Like, I was just thinking, how am I different from Senator? I mean, there's a ton of ways, but the first thing that popped into my mind was I had just come back so it must have been actually early October. because the last week of September, I went to Brownsville, Texas, to the Brownsville, Texas area, and I spent 5 days down there as a volunteer lawyer helping people with their asylum applications. This one particular young man who was in Port Isabel Detention Center. And then I spent a little bit of time one evening going over the border and helping serve meals to the asylum seekers at the encampment across the bridge in Matamoros. And so I had just come back from there, and I was thinking about how when it was more in the news, the whole kids in cages story was more in the news when that was happening at a more feverish pace, and families being separated, children being removed from their parents. I was thinking, I've spent my whole career representing abused kids, and she's supporting somebody and supporting a policy that is permanently traumatizing these children. Some of them will never, ever, ever recover from the months, or in some cases years. Some of those children, I believe, have still not been returned to their parents in some cases. And who knows, may never be, because I do believe the administration kind of has lost track of a number of literally can't rematch them. And other longs, don't get me started, my head will explode kind of conversation. So that's definitely one thing. And again, it goes back to paying lip service versus what are you actually doing. I would no doubt say that Senator Ernst would say that she's very much cares about children, but in reality, doesn't seem to apply to children of immigrants, because it's okay to permanently traumatize them, and that's all right, evidently. So, and then the other thing is, Senator Ernst, really, her campaign was not, when she ran for this seat in 2014, and I should just back up a little, she was an Iowa state legislator before she was recruited literally by the Koch brothers to run for this U.S. Senate seat. She was recruited by them because she was very, very, very conservative. This was when Iowa had a Democratic majority, House and Senate. So she wasn't getting anything passed, but she was always putting forth these extremely conservative, like abortion ban bills and things like that. So she was recruited out of the Iowa legislature to run for this seat. And her campaign actually, from what I understand, didn't take off in a huge, huge way until this one commercial got made. And, a lot of times it only takes one commercial. It only takes one marketing slogan, like best senator money can't buy. It only takes one marketing slogan to catch on, and then everybody all of a sudden knows about you and thinks you're fantastic, as shallow as that may seem. And Joni's was, I'm going to go to Washington and I'm going to make them squeal. I'm going to get the pork out of Washington. And she was a farm girl, so the commercial was like, and this got parodied on Saturday Night Live. It was so over the top and so laughable. Well, she had the last laugh because she got elected. And I believe that a lot of the reason that many people voted for her was a couple. One, they wanted to vote for a woman. I've had a few Democratic women who have confessed to me that they voted for her because they wanted a woman senator, and because, to be fair, she was pitching herself as a more moderate Democrat or Republican in that election. And she was also really, really pitching this, make them squeal, get out the corruption, let's hold Washington accountable, and kind of sounds like, I don't know, drain the swamp. So, I think that a lot of politicians, but especially recently Republicans, have tried to, their con job is I'm not like other politicians. I'm not a Washington insider. So I'm going to go to Washington and shake it up, and I'm going to hold people accountable. And there's not going to be all this lobby money and all this backroom dealing and all this, all this stuff going on. And I think a lot of people bought that from Joni. They bought that she was going to go to Washington and make them squeal. And as I say on my website, the only people squealing are Iowans harmed by her votes. And that's virtually the only people squealing, because all of the special interests, the healthcare industry, the pharmaceutical industry, from whom she takes a lot of money, the NRA, from who spent over $3 million on ads in the 2014 cycle to help her win, ads against her opponent. They're all, they're being the ones that she's representing, essentially. And that is obvious by every vote that she takes. And she's not representing really any of us regular people at all, and never has. So, yeah. So those are two ways we're very different. Like, I actually am not beholden to corporations, and I will actually do my very best to hold people accountable. And she's kind of the opposite. And I've been defending and protecting and representing children for 20 years. And the best I can tell, since she's been a senator, what she's done and supported has harmed children irreparably in some cases.
Well, unfortunately, yeah, I agree. Well, I think probably the last thing that I'd like to kind of cover is to kind of zoom in on what is specifically important. And of course, we just went through the presidential, the caucuses and all this kind of stuff. And so, I'm from New Hampshire, you're from Iowa. We know what it's like to have the presidents there, and you're trying to address issues that are specific to Iowa and things like that. One thing that I noticed, and I had heard other candidates, presidential candidates, talk about it along the way, that I would have had no idea had anything to, was a concern in Iowa. When we were talking about agriculture and people who are involved in agriculture, it's basically that it's something about how the people can't repair their own. I know this is an interesting thing that I, as someone from New Hampshire or someone who lives in an urban area or anything like that, I would have no idea. So I'd love to kind of dive into that a little bit and just kind of find out, what is this all about? I think that it's something that we should be concerned about.
Well, it just basically is really what you just said, is that these corporations that sell these now really expensive farm equipment, like combines that cost in excess of $100,000. I mean, they're extraordinarily expensive, and they're all now computerized and run on GPS and all of this stuff. But my understanding is that essentially, when you purchase this equipment, that you're not allowed to make your own repairs, even if it's something that you could easily repair yourself. And that ends up also being a really big hardship for small and medium-sized farmers, particularly, huge sort of industrial agriculture, giant people that are farming 30, 40,000 acres of land, 50,000 acres of land, and corporations that are doing that. Maybe a little bit different story for them. But for a small and medium farmer to not be able to repair their own equipment and have to take it to be repaired by the manufacturer at a really, really high cost. I mean, to me, it sounds a lot like if say, Ford said you can't take your Ford truck to your own local mechanic. You have to take it to the Ford dealership. Like, you have to, where maybe they would charge you more for that repair. I don't know, but so that's something I know that Senator Sanders has specifically on Senator Sanders has specifically addressed, like on his website. I know there's a portion of his website, I believe, that addresses that. And so I would certainly be in favor of creating a federal law that would allow, anybody to repair their own equipment and legally allow that to happen, for sure. I mean, small and medium farmers need absolutely all the help they can get. They need farm bills that are actually for them. They need farm bills that aren't again just a dressed up corporate giveaway. Too often, I mean, that's not all that's in a farm bill, but often there are so many things in a farm bill that really amount to helping already profitable and already very wealthy corporations, rather than giving incentives or subsidies and supporting small and medium farmers to do things like build wetlands around their farms so that they can filter out more of the chemicals that are coming off their farms. You know, there's all kinds of things that could be done to help sequester more carbon. There are things that can be done that cost money to invest in initially, and that some of those things farmers need help with to be able to do. And they certainly want to do what's best for the planet. You know, that's what I see universally, at least among the smaller farming operations. But a lot of times, again, they're barely hanging on by their fingernails as it is. They don't have the extra to do things maybe how they would prefer to do them because it just costs more money. So we should definitely be making those investments to allow farmers to be able to do those kinds of things that they want to do, but they may need more support to do.
Absolutely. Well, I thought it was really interesting because that just seems like such a prime example of people who, you know, large corporations kind of writing the laws. Because why? What would be the justification for that? Why
Right.
on earth would anyone, you know,
Right.
not be able to repair something themselves or something like?
Kind of how we talk about it is we call it right to repair, is for shorthand. And yeah, I mean, a similar kind of thing where how you can see the influence, the corporate footprint, right, in legislation, and also currently, unfortunately, even in enforcement of laws. So we have antitrust laws, for example, but they need to be enforced. And another thing that our farmers are facing here in Iowa and everywhere in the country is that huge multinational corporations have essentially bought up the whole supply chain. So, and the whole chain from inputs to outputs. What that means is that the same company, or maybe one or two companies, own the fertilizer company, they own the seed company, and then at the end of it all, they're going to tell you how much they're going to pay you for the commodity that you just grew, basically in a way that was dictated entirely by them, with the pricing all dictated by them up and down the chain. And we've got to be breaking up these giant corporations to create more competition. We've got to be enforcing our antitrust laws. And that just isn't happening at the scale at all that it needs to be, if at all. I'd be shocked if any of that was, you know, even attempted to be enforced under this current administration. But really, it's not a very sexy, you know, platform to talk about, you know, piece of a platform, but it's hugely important. And it's hugely important to the dollars and cents of small and medium farmers to being able to make it. And if we, you know, we've got the dollar generalization of rural America, as my friend J.D. Scholten says, who, you know, J.D. Scholten is, I don't know if all your viewers know, but J.D. Scholten is running against Steve King in Iowa's 4th District. Go JD. He ran in 2018 as well. None of the pundits gave JD a chance in hell of taking down Steve King. And he came within, I think, 2 percentage points in a district where nobody had ever gotten closer than, I don't know, Tim might know, I want to say something like 12 to 18 points. Like no Democrat had ever, and JD narrowly missed. And so he's running again. He's going to take him out this time. I'm very confident. But JD travels all around the 4th District, which is very red, very rural, very farm heavy in that district. And he talks to people all the time about antitrust legislation because it is so critically important to the health of our rural towns and our rural communities. We can't have Dollar General coming into town and super Walmarts and taking out all of these mom and pop stores, you know, and because that's getting rid of a lot of jobs when it does that. And it's also, frankly, eroding the quality of life that a lot of people are living in rural communities for. you know. So that's really important. Antitrust legislation. There's a gentleman named Austin Frericks, who's written extensively about enforcement of antitrust legislation, and how it impacts rural communities especially. And if anybody's interested in reading more about that, I would point you to Austin's writing, because he's done a lot of writing about it and he's great.
I love it. I'm literally writing it down right now. Austin, look into that.
I think it's Frerichs. If you just Google like Austin antitrust, you'll probably find his writings. Austin.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I'm going to look into it. Thank you for the tip.
And he's an Iowan too. I think, is he back? He went away to do a fellowship for a while somewhere. Austin Frericks did, but he's an Iowan. In fact, he ran for Congress in 2018 in the 3rd district here. Frederick, not Frericks, sorry. Thanks, Tim. That's why I have Tim. Austin Frederick.
Well, you got it right. You corrected it. So,
That's right.
You can be happy with that.
Yeah.
And I do know JD. I thought that was great. I followed his campaign in 2018, and I'm happy to hear he's running again. I hadn't followed it that close. Yeah. Great candidate. Well, I just appreciate so much. I appreciate everything that you're doing, the policies that you're advocating for, and for coming on our show. I really
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this was a pretty great conversation. Is there anything, before I kind of close it out, is there anything that you'd like to say, kind of wrap it all up with bow?
I guess, a couple of things. Everybody on my team will get really angry at me if I don't say, if you'd like to donate to our campaign, since we are not taking corporate PAC or corporate lobbyist money, our average donation, and so I told you guys the end run around I'm not taking corporate PAC money, right? The way that some candidates, some Democrats are end running around that is they will take corporate lobby money. They just won't say they are taking corporate lobby money. Well, the other thing like that is some candidates will say, my average online donation is $20, when their average donation is probably more like $500, because they get a lot of their money by calling wealthy donors who will then send in checks. And so they sort of try to make themselves sound more grassrootsy than they are by separating the online donations. So I just want to say our average donation is $25 across all sources. So we truly, truly do depend on our lower dollar donors, and a lot of them. So if you think, I can only give $2, that's nothing, I just won't bother, please bother. We could, if you can spare it, we can use it, and we will put it to good use. We're a very lean campaign staff. We've only got 5 people on our campaign staff, and then an army of volunteers. I don't get paid currently to run at all, so I'm not taking any money from the campaign. It goes to staffers and then media and different things that we need to purchase. The voter file costs $60,000 in the state of Iowa. So we had to pay we're still paying $60,000 just to have access to the voter file to be able to canvass and organize. So yeah, follow our Twitter account. Disclaimer, 90% of the tweets, probably 95, are from our digital outreach coordinator. When I tweet, it will say KG after it. Some people have commented on the level of snark and entertainment on our Twitter. I wish I were that entertaining and snarky and that funny. I'm really not. So usually that's Tim, but but Tim does know my policy positions, and those are always spot on. So, but it's entertaining. We went from 0 to 46,000 Twitter followers in 10 months.
Whoa, that's great.
When our campaign's over, Tim will probably be available. So if any other candidates want to hire him, he might be available, and we'll see. We don't know. So otherwise, he may just stay on as my digital outreach coordinator for however long, for however long I'm in the U.S. Senate. So, but yeah, he's great. So yeah, follow our Twitter, donate to the campaign if you can. But more than any of that, don't donate to our campaign if you do not have the money to spare. Everybody, these are really hard times for so many people. Some people are perfectly fine, whose jobs, don't depend on being able to go out in the community and do their work, or who've already been working from home, or whatever. But there's a whole lot of people who are in desperate times right now financially. Um, so of course, take care of yourself, take care of your family, your loved ones. So if you have a couple bucks, as I heard JD say this the other day, and spot on, no surprise, I agree with most of what JD ever has said and ever says. He encouraged people to donate to a nonprofit or to a local charity. And then if they still have a few bucks, donate to his campaign. And I agree 100%. So we would love to have your support, but take care of yourselves first. And follow our campaign. We also have national volunteers. So if you want a phone bank or text bank for us, you can do that from anywhere in the country. You do not have to live in Iowa, because we're not doing any door knocking. So all of our campaigning now is being done virtually. So we would love to have you volunteer, and you can sign up to volunteer at kimberlyforiowa.com, kimberlyforiowa.com.
Great. Well, I hope a lot of people heed that call. I would love to see you in the Senate, and I think you'd be a very, very good senator and representative for the people of Iowa.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and appreciate your viewers. Thank you so much. We'll see you. Stay safe, everybody.
All right.